Welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Allie.
We've got a great episode for you today. We're talking NWSL, we're talking WSL, and guess what, everybody? It's the international break coming up this weekend, and we've got a preview of that too. We're talking rosters and what games you should be circling. Allie is the most excited for that segment.
I think it makes no sense to me, this international break, because, I mean, I guess you can't focus it around one league, but as when we get onto the NWSL, there's one game left of regular season. How disruptive is that?
It's such a bummer of timing for the NWSL to go on pause right now, especially when the hype and the momentum is getting ramped up. Everybody wants the last weekend of the NWSL to happen this coming weekend, but it's not. It's going to be in 2 weeks. And that's actually, you could also look at it as that's going to shake things up too. Yeah. Maybe these results are less predictable for the NWSL because of that.
Maybe, but I'm even less hyped for international break.
Here's the only reason I say I agree with you. It's because the games for this international break pale in comparison to the games that are scheduled for the next one, for the last one of 2024. But we're not doing a great job in getting everybody pumped for international break this coming weekend. Wait till the end of the episode and you will be. We promise.
Yeah. Though, drop it in our comments. Hit us up on socials whether you enjoy international break or if you're like me, you like it to have a purpose. Or if you hate it completely, let us know. We love interactions with you guys. So hit us up on our socials at The WSL Show. Your feelings on international break.
All right. And without further ado, let's get into it.
We are starting on Sarah's side of the Atlantic, and we are going to be talking about the NWSL. It was the penultimate games of regular season this weekend, and there has been a shake-up with the playoffs. We have now got one more guaranteed place cemented, so that's 6 teams that have now qualified for the playoffs. We've said goodbye to another 3 teams, and it all comes into this final game week in a couple of weeks' time. So 3 teams, 2 spots.
There it is. We're going to get into the games and the playoff picture and also why there's no decision day like there was last year. But before we do, we got to touch on a few really important facts or things that happened from this past weekend, including, we got to start it out, Temwa Shawinga with a goal in Kansas City's 4-1 win over San Diego Wave this past weekend made her the only player to ever score against every single team in a single season. She also continues to build on her regular season, single season record of goals scored in 1 year, 1 season. That came out weird, but you get what I'm saying. 20 goals so far in the season with 1 game remaining. The previous record was 18 goals from Sam Kerr. That was from 2019 when she was with the Chicago Red Stars. The last year she was in the NWSL, actually. And Shawinga has just blown that out of the water, not to mention also 6 assists on the year. A special season from a really special player that we've gotten to witness. How can you not be happy about that?
Yeah, I think I love it when records get broken because it just shows the leaps and bounds we are coming on in this game. I hate it when records have stood for so long that just, we've seen some growth. So it couldn't have been to a better player. I love Shawinga as a player, and having her come over to the NWSL is huge. And well done, Kansas City, for managing to grab such a diamond of a player.
Yeah, I think anybody that's not Kansas City or Orlando Pride is sitting there being like, I really wish we coulda, but you didn't. I guess keeping it on Kansas City became the first club to sell out every single home game in one singular regular season. And that's on having a brand new stadium, bringing the fans in. It kind of helps that it's 13,500 attendance, but whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm not taking it away from Kansas City. That's fantastic. And by the way, they're hosting the final this year. It's going to be an epic environment. And that's just huge. I don't care how big or small your stadium is. If you're selling out every single game, that's massive.
100%. Speaking of assists, Croy Bethune still leads the league in assists, despite the fact she has not played in the last 8 games now. She is likely to be a shoo-in for Rookie of the Year in Sarah's humble list of opinions.
I think a lot of people agree with me on that, but that might be an interesting topic for further on down the line because there have been some outstanding rookie seasons across the board in the NWSL that we can talk about.
Yeah, but it is a personal shame that she's not been able to play for the entire season. I can't wait to see what she brings when she can play for an entire season because she has been phenomenal so far.
Yeah. The final thing, because we're not going to talk about Angel City, we're not going to talk about that game, but we have to say, for some reason, Sydney Leroux continues to score bangers at the end of every regular season. Last year, at the final game of the regular season, she scored a bicycle kick. And this year, she took a ball off the chest, volleyed it into the top bins. This woman can score worldies. And we just wanted to say that because if you haven't seen it, you should push pause, go to YouTube, watch it right now. Or TikTok, or wherever you watch your. I'm dating myself by saying YouTube.
Heartbreak for Sydney Leroux as her girlfriend, in air quotes, has announced their retirement. Matthias has said that this is the last season, done, end of. And as when we come on to playoffs, Angel City are no longer in contention for playoffs. There is only one more game left for that marvelous pairing.
I'll just say, Allie says air quotes because the two of them make a lot of jokes because they have been mistaken for a couple because they did like a fake prom proposal together. But they're just very good friends. Merritt Mathias, let's see, 12 years in the NWSL, close to 200 NWSL appearances. She's at 196. She's a 3-time NWSL champion, 3-time NWSL Shield winner, and she's also been awarded NWSL Best 11 Second Team once before in her career, just a staple of this league, and she'll be missed a lot. And I know her personality as well will be missed at Angel City.
Speaking of personalities that will be missed, legends of the game that will be missed, officially Kelly O'Hara retired this weekend. The 20th of October was her retirement day at Gotham. And that, for me, is a proper end of an era because you know, you can talk about different players, but one of the faces for especially the US national team for me was Kelly O'Hara because she was always there doing bits behind the scenes, was always, that prankmeister, her and Sonnet, always. And yeah, it's an end of an era that O'Hara has hung up the boots.
Yeah, I think Becky's the last one left from that era. This one feels really bittersweet, but it does feel like we've had a lot of time to digest it because she announced that she had played her last game a little bit ago. So we knew that this date was coming where Gotham were honoring her in their last home regular season game. So it felt like a nice closing of the books. And maybe that's a perfect transition into let's get into the games from the NWSL. And maybe let's just talk about Gotham first.
Let's talk about Gotham first. So Gotham took it 3-1 over Orlando. Orlando suffered their first defeat last weekend and seemed to be having a couple of issues, do we think? Because you can't say this time that they were resting regulars and everything else because it was their normal lineup and they still lost 3-1. They don't look so impenetrable as they have all season. Is there trouble in paradise, or is this just a little bit of a blip and there's nothing to worry about?
Look, I don't think it's a great time to be dropping results because you want momentum going into the playoffs, and dropping 2 in a row with just one game left in the regular season before the playoffs begin isn't exactly what you want. However, the downside of an undefeated season is that you really don't, A, learn how to play from behind or right the ship in the middle of the game if you're losing, and B, it's cliche, but you do learn the most when you lose. And with these 2 losses, I think this is actually giving Orlando learnings that they can take, they can learn from. And now it's a matter of this team that hadn't really lost, figuring out how to right the ship after a loss. What's important is that they finish strong in the final game, take that momentum into playoffs. I don't think that there's trouble in paradise whatsoever. I'll also add in that Gotham FC, I think, played one of their best games of the year in that moment against Orlando. I think they had a bit of a bone to pick because of what happened last time. So no, not trouble in paradise. I think that if we ask that question again, if Orlando dropped their final regular season game, I think we can ask that question again and it'll be a different answer. But right now, it's nothing to worry about. Get the momentum, win your last regular season game, take it into your home playoffs, and everything's fine.
Yeah, I do think being away probably didn't help because Gotham has a fantastic support at home. And like you said, they had a bone to pick from the last time out. So they probably, and also having an event like it, like we mentioned, it was Kelly O'Hara's official retirement. That always spurs on a team when they've got something to play for, even if it's just, saying goodbye to a beloved player. It does tend to make them, play harder, better. So yeah, I don't think Pride fans need to cry just yet.
No, definitely not. And Orlando taking on Seattle in the final game of the season. And I'm not saying that any game is a given, but Seattle, we know, has not had the finest of years. They've only won 6 games this entire year. They've lost 14. So it should be, if you circle it, just a little bit of a less competitive game than what they saw against Gotham.
Let's talk about Sarah's other home team, as I'm calling them, which is...
I think that's right. I think I do have 2 home teams.
Yes, I think you do. That wasn't a dig at you, my dear. That was...
No, I think I'm coming to terms because Gotham have been my team. I've been living in New York. Where I was born and raised didn't have a team. And then where I was born and raised got a team. And I feel like my heart's been torn. But it doesn't have to be. It can love 2 things.
It can love 2 things. And so we're going to, if you haven't guessed, talk about Bay FC's 1-0 win over North Carolina Courage. This result was huge in terms of playoffs and the 3 pointers that this has got, and may have saved Bay's playoff dream. Let's talk about Del Kemper and that phenomenal goal late on at the 83rd minute.
Abby Dahlkemper may, like you just said, may have saved the playoffs for Bay FC. And it's too perfect of a story. This is somebody who's from the Bay Area. She was signed to Bay FC mid-season. Ashwala said that when she came in, everything changed. And then she basically scores a goal that saves the playoffs for her hometown team. It was, by the way, the first goal that she scored in the NWSL at home at Bay FC in front of her hometown team, because the one other one she scored for Bay FC was away. She is becoming, and like the signing of Abby Dahlkemper to Bay FC is becoming just one of the most heartwarming stories out of this entire year. And yeah, it can't be said enough. She may have saved the playoffs for Bay FC, and here's why. Because going into that weekend, Portland was in 7, Bay FC was in 8th, and Racing Louisville was in 9th place, right? And that playoff line cuts off after 8 teams. Racing Louisville had just gone into Portland and beat Portland, which meant that before the game started at Bay FC were actually sitting in 9th place behind Racing Louisville, tied on points, but Racing were ahead in goal differential. So Bay FC needed at least a point out of that game. And after all of the results, they knew that if they could secure 4 points total over the last 2 games, so a win and a draw at minimum, they were going to make the playoffs. And to get the 3 points before they go on the road to play their final game, because they'll play their final regular season game on the road, to get those 3 points is huge so that they can go into the last game of the regular season in 8th place still.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And their game is actually against Houston Dash. And again, as we say, anything can happen. This league is anything but predictable. But considering the season that Houston Dash have had this season, I would say that Bay were probably going in quietly confident.
Yeah, and think about the pressure that it takes off to know that they can go into Houston and advance to the playoffs with a draw. If they draw against Houston, they still control their own destiny. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. They will go into the playoffs. That is so much less pressure than knowing you have to go in and win, especially for a team like Bay FC, who is not scoring a lot right now. If you look at how many goals they score per game on average, it's almost 1. And that's not a lot of goals, especially for a team that early in the season was known for conceding goals.
Shall we give the wonderful listeners of ours a playoff placement round off? Because we are, as I said, we are in the penultimate week. We've just had those matches. The final week is in a couple of weeks' time, and there is so much that could happen. As I mentioned at the top of this segment, there are 2 spots and 3 teams within contention. Louisville did so much to help their chances by beating Portland. Obviously, Bay's win means that they can get away with a playoff place with a draw. So let's talk about right now who has secured a spot in the playoffs already.
So when we talked about this last week, we knew the top 5 teams had already secured a spot, and that's Orlando, Washington, Gotham, Kansas City, and North Carolina. And after this past weekend, Chicago officially secured their playoff spot as well, because they sit at 32 points right now. Even if they finish with 32 points, Racing Louisville, who is in 9th, cannot catch them. They're 4 points behind Chicago. So Chicago gets added to the list of teams that have secured themselves a playoff spot.
Okay, and just very quickly to run down to the teams that are officially out. Sarah does not get her chaos as Utah is officially out of the running, as is Angel City, as is Seattle, which is a huge surprise considering Seattle's history, but considering the season that they've had, less of a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
San Diego and Houston are already out. San Diego is the hugest shock, I would say, because they've gone from being Shield winners to crashing out in regular season. That is a whole topic for another show. So
I would throw Seattle in with that, because San Diego won the Shield, but Seattle were playing in the finals. Seattle played in the championship against Gotham last year.
So that's a whole topic. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. And we'll talk about what it means for these teams that had done so well to come crashing down. But let's talk about the 3 that can still advance in the playoffs. Those 3 teams are the Portland Thorns, Bay FC, and Racing Louisville are all competing for those final 2 spots. So who is in control of their destiny? Who is reliant on others? Let's start with the Thorns. What do they need to do to advance?
All right, we're going to do our best. I'm going to do my best to really condense this down, because I know standings math is not everybody's favorite. So let's make this as simple as possible, even though this is anything but simple. Portland need a draw or a win to ensure that they advance. If they draw or they win, it does not matter what Bay FC does, and it does not matter what Racing Louisville does. They will get into the playoffs. Now, if they lose, in order to get into the playoffs, they will need either Bay FC or Racing Louisville to also lose, and then they will still make it. But in that sense, it's harder because they don't control their own destiny.
Okay, so your second home team, Bay FC, is the destiny in their hands, or are they reliant on other results? What do they need to do to ensure playoff places?
Bay FC's in a little bit more of a precarious position because they don't have the win on goal differential. They have a worse goal differential than both Portland and Racing Louisville. So right now, if they win or draw, alike to Portland, they will make it into the playoffs. They control their own destiny in that sense, where 1 point or 3 points, and it doesn't matter what the other teams do, they are in the playoffs, period, the end. If they lose, they need Racing Louisville to lose as well in order to make it into the playoffs. If Bay FC loses, Racing wins, but Portland loses, Bay FC will not make it into the playoffs on goal differential.
And then finally, the team that's just on the edge of the playoffs, Racing Louisville. It is sort of in their hands, but also isn't. So what exactly do Louisville need in order to secure that 8th spot?
Yeah, I would say it's not in their hands whatsoever. They need a win, and they need AFC to lose. If Portland lose and Racing win, but Bay wins also, Racing could technically still get in, but then it's going to come down to how much did Portland lose by. Portland would have to lose by a few goals, and Racing would have to win by a few goals, and then their goal differential would catapult Racing above Portland. So it might get really complicated here. If we end up in a situation where Racing Louisville wins and Portland loses and Bay wins, what it's literally going to come down to is how much did Portland lose by and how much did Racing win by, and who has the better goal differential. And between those two teams, Portland and Racing, one of them will get into the playoffs and one of them will lose out on goal differential. Okay, I made it as simple as I could. It gets really complicated.
And talking of complicated, the end day. We are not getting a decision day this year for the NWSL. So decision day, for anybody who's not aware, is last year in the NWSL was mirroring what most European teams do, which is all teams played on the same day at the same time. This is normally done to ensure that teams don't throw matches in order to get a better standing or a better matchup. So for this example, we talked about how seed 1 will play seed 8. Mm-hmm. Some may throw it so that they're not playing seed 1. They do it to avoid all that. This year, because of many reasons, probably because they've got 4 different streaming platforms for the NWSL, they're not doing that. So they're having a regular season weekend where the teams will play at different times on different days, which is going to, again, cause all sorts of drama and confusion.
I don't know if they can do anything about it next year because the media deal is done for a couple years now. But whenever they have to re-sign the media deal, I hope that they do fix that.
All these games take place on the first weekend of November. So make sure that you check out and find out who clinches those all-important 2 final playoff places.
Let's go around the world. Around the world, around the world. Over to Italy. Juventus remains undefeated in the league after drawing this weekend. Previous champs Roma remain in 4th despite beating Milan 2-1 this weekend. Fiorentina remains 2nd after scraping a win.
To France, and PSG are your new league leaders after their win over Fleury 91. Lyon slips to 2nd with their draw against Paris FC. Saint Etienne fall to 4th after their loss to Dijon.
Over to Germany, Bayern Munich remain number 1 as they beat Bayern Leverkusen. Despite their loss, Eintracht Frankfurt remains 2nd and Wolfsburg climbed to 3rd.
And finally to Scotland, Glasgow City are top of the league after thumping Dundee United 13-0. Rangers can only manage a draw, leaving them 2nd. Celtic have fallen to 5th despite their win this weekend.
Have you checked out Total Football Analysis yet? TotalFootballAnalysis.com provides research analysis on loads of football, including the women's game. Want all the stats in one place instead of drowning in a mountain of tabs? Want to explore key matchups and the tactics from both teams? Total Football Analysis provides the stats and analysis to help you learn more about the beautiful game. We have a special discount for listeners of the Women's Soccer Show. At checkout, type WSL10 to get a full year for just €10. That's €40 of the yearly subscription. Head over to TotalFootballAnalysis.com and type WSL10 at checkout.
Over to the WSL. Before we get into the games from this past weekend, we talked a lot last week, obviously, about how Jonas technically resigned. He was let go from Arsenal, and we talked about, was that the right decision, so on and so forth. And since then, I think that there's been a conversation in the world of women's soccer around if there's a culture shift. And I've seen a lot of people saying that the calls for Jonas's job, and specifically the graffiti on the side of the wall next to the stadium, is indicative actually of a shift in culture in the world of women's soccer in a bad way, that now it's starting to mirror more men's football culture. I think this is a really interesting subject, so we wanted to bring it into the podcast. Allie, what do you think of that statement? Do you agree with that?
I don't think my eyes could roll harder than they could right now. Do I think that's a bad thing? No. I think that we want to have passion in our teams, and I think that we do want a sense of rivalry, which I do think has been missing. I don't want to see it get as vile as it has in the men's game, but there is something about wanting your team to be the best and having a rivalry with other teams, and you can be all friends after the 90 minutes, but as the 90 minutes go, you are passionately for your team. I don't think the graffiti was a step too far. I mean, yeah, it's illegal, but because it shows that there is still a love and a want for the women's team that we haven't seen for a long time, because as we've talked about with Man United, and you can see it with Man City to an extent with Taylor, there has been such an apathy from those above that I think it's going to take something big, such as someone painting on a wall, to the fans are unhappy and that they're not going to put up with their lot, so to speak. I think we've got a bigger problem, and again, this is a topic for another time, with some of the parasocial relationships that players are being put under. We've seen an increase in teams saying that the players are not going to come around to do autographs and photos due to stalking. I know for a fact that there was a fan who decided that they were going to attend Ella Toon's dad's funeral because they felt like they knew them.
That's again stalking, not a fan. Stalking.
Yeah, it's stalking. We're seeing it over and over again. And so I think that is a bigger issue than the culture shift of more negativity surrounding, which I don't think is negative. Wanting the best for your team is not negative. Calling for Jonas's job is not negative if he's not doing the job he's supposed to do.
I think it can come out in a negative way, but I agree with you in terms of like when I first heard that, I was like, I don't think that graffiti is indicative of anything. Now, I said multiple times last week, I don't like the idea of calling for somebody's job because it's a human being and it's their job. And we also have talked plenty of times, Allie, about on social media, there's a way to be on social media supporting your team that is, not being an asshole, for lack of a better word. But I think that the larger conversation, I would agree with you, like this graffiti, Arsenal fans saying that maybe it's time for a change in head coach, that itself doesn't indicate a culture shift to me. If it gets toxic, obviously I'm against it. These are human beings. But I think that it does bring up an interesting question, which is, and a topic that we've talked about a lot, Allie, which is about the larger shift in the world of women's soccer and actually just within the world of women's sports culture, because we are seeing as attendances grow, as viewership grows, as this sport becomes a bigger part of everybody's lives and more people feel like they can comment on it, it can get really, really toxic really quickly. And we've seen that in a really ugly way in the WNBA here in this country. And I think that specifically is a fear within the larger women's soccer community, that this space that has always been very safe is going to become very toxic. But let's not get it twisted here. The women's soccer community has always been calling for people's jobs, has always been doing these things. 10 years ago, when just a smaller portion of us were watching, there were still people doing that. So that specifically, I don't think is indicative of a shift. But I think, we talked about this in the World Cup, Allie. There has been one. It's become more toxic because it's become more mainstream. Other things are indicative of that. Not this particularly with Arsenal. But you were saying some interesting things about players as well who have been outspoken online.
So interestingly, a player that's come out is Zinsberger, because obviously Arsenal have been at the centre of this whole conversation of a culture shift. And she did a post on LinkedIn of all social media platforms. That's the one that got me the most. I was like, really? LinkedIn? And she's talking about the fact that she's not saying that anybody is above criticism. And she's talked about how positive it has been at Arsenal with attendance records and everything else. But she does say, we are public figures and there are always people who judge us and are critical, but it's always a question of how. Yes, fans are allowed to express their opinion and say that they think a change of coach is good, but I don't think it's okay and disrespectful to meet a person with hate on the net or in the stadium. Graffiti was created, boo shouts in the stadium, hate comments and negative comments that were below the belt. And I agree with her on the second half that, there are ways to do it and that there is no need to go below the belt and be offensive with your critique. But I don't think booing is that bad. Like, I've changed my mind on it. I don't think that's probably the politest way you can show your discontent, is booing someone. I don't think the graffiti was below the belt. It just asked for him to leave the job. It wasn't like they called him all the names under the sun. I think that was pretty respectful comparatively to what it could be. So I agree in some parts with Zinsberger, but I don't agree in others.
She is certainly right that players see everything, like whether you tag them or not. I tweeted the other day, something along the lines of, "It's always a pleasure watching Denise O'Sullivan play." And she literally responded like, "Thank you, that's really sweet." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't tag her. She just saw it. They see everything." So I'm glad she's saying like, stop with the below the belt stuff. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in. I don't know that will, but anyways, happy we chatted about that. I think the larger conversation around culture shift is one that is always present and always important. But without further ado, let's get into the weekend of it, because we had another weekend in the WSL, and the first team that I want to talk about is Crystal Palace. And if you'd asked me, do you think you'll be talking about Crystal Palace come week 5, 6? If you'd asked me that week 1 or week 2, I'd be like, no, looks like it's probably going to be the same story over and over and over again, unfortunately, this year for Crystal Palace. But it is not. And the first 2 games of the WSL were tough for Crystal Palace. They lost 4-0 to Tottenham in their opener, and then they lost 7-0 to Chelsea. And since then, it's been a different story. They beat Leicester City 2-0. They lost just 1-0 to Brighton, who's been having a great season. And then, this past weekend, they drew with Liverpool 1-1. What has changed, Allie?
I do think it does take time to come together as a team. They have made a couple of new signings, so that's going to take time for them to gel. It is a completely different arena going into the WSL. They are facing tougher opponents than they may have faced in the Championship, so that's going to be a huge thing. We've definitely seen some good results for them, and you know what? Here's that it may continue, because we don't always want to see, the team that gets promoted to go straight back down. So I do think there's definitely some sort of shift going on with Palace.
Yeah, if you look just at how many goals they conceded, my biggest thing for them after the first 2 games was that they will not make it in this league if they continue to leak goals how they leaked goals. And yes, they played Tottenham and Chelsea the first 2 games, so that's different as well. But I think that they've shored up their defense in a huge way. When you concede 11 goals in the first 2 games, something needs to change. And that's obviously what they've put a lot of effort into. The following game, it was a clean sheet. Leicester City did not score against them. And when you can beat people like Leicester City, who you're probably at some point going to be in a battle in the table with, actually right now, Crystal Palace sit just 1 point behind Leicester City. Those are big moments. And so for Crystal Palace, it's all in the defense. We knew that they could score goals. The difference has been they've shored up that back line in a beautiful way.
Moving on to the Chelsea-Tottenham game, it was not without controversy in the fact that Chelsea went up quite quickly, 1-0, and then Tottenham equalised in a very controversial, was it a cross, was it an attempt on goal, and it's asked the question, is it finally time that it becomes imperative that the women's game get goal line technology? Because I would say this goal was almost as controversial as the Sweden-USA goal in the World Cup.
I'm so happy that that came up again. Yes, how many times have we said goal line technology? Get goal line technology. It is so important. I don't know if this was a goal or not. I think it's a little far for people to be going and saying, oh, well, Chelsea won this game because of that. No, listen. Chelsea won this game by a lot more than 1 goal. And yes, it changed the course of the game, but 5-2, let's not go that far.
And then finally, Manchester City seem to be having a bit of a blip in form. Despite maintaining their unbeaten record, they've had to come from behind in the last 3 games in order to go on and win. They went down very quickly with an Aston Villa goal this weekend. They went down very quickly with a Liverpool goal, and it wasn't until 2 very quick Bunny Shaw goals that they managed to come back from that game. I know that their Champions League game was not for the faint-hearted. They are the odds-on favourites to win the league this year, but they're also the most likely to have a slip-up against a team to blow their chances. Do we think that they're still having a hangover from beating Barca, or is this a sign of a bigger thing?
I don't think it's a sign of a bigger thing at all. It's a sign of the fact that they've had to play a lot of games and a lot of very competitive games in a small period of time. And nobody's ever won a title or a championship by playing pretty soccer every single game. Sometimes they wins have to be ugly. The point is that they pulled out the win. It doesn't change anything for me. I still think that they are the odds-on favorite to win this league for good reason. And I think that these games maybe even are telling of that, and less telling of an issue and more telling of the fact that, hey, even in these weeks where they're doubling up, they're playing in their league and they're playing Champions League and it's a lot of tough competition, they're still finding a way to pull out the victories and find the goals even when they're tired. All right, and finally, it is international break this weekend, everybody. What we have on the docket for this segment is we're going to talk U.S. Women's National Team roster briefly. Then we're going to briefly discuss the England Lionesses. And then we're going to give you a rundown of some games that we have circled outside of course, England and the USA that we think you could turn on and enjoy. So let's do it. Allie?
Let's start on your side of the pond, because I feel like there was some more controversy over the US national team selection. We obviously saw that Lily Johannes was not selected this time round, and I think Emma Hayes made a great point, which is she's coming up to the point now where she's going to have to make a commitment to one national team or the other, and this is to not put pressure on her to pick the USA. She's still debating and still deciding, and this is to give her that space, and I think that's fantastic, because yes, there is a idea that, yeah, of course she's going to pick the USA, but the Netherlands is a strong setup too, and so she just needs to take that time. There was some queries about certain players coming up in this camp despite not having the best domestic form right now. So what is the reason for why they will have been picked?
Yeah, I think it's important, and Emma Hayes made a point to say this on the press conference, which I think was really great of her and very important, that because of the U.S. Women's National Team CBA, or Collective Bargaining Agreement, that CBA requires all available Olympic players to be called up. So Emma Hayes only had a certain number of empty slots, if you will, to bring in new players because of that requirement per the CBA.
So do you have thoughts on your selections? Do you think it's a good team to go out for your friendlies?
Listen, if you've been listening to press conferences for the U.S. Women's National Team or listening to what Emma Hayes has been saying, she has been very clear that after the Olympics, she was basically going to go back and start calling people, young players, into camp who had not gotten a look before. This is part of her model where she's not just developing the U.S. Women's National Senior Team, she is also in charge of developing an entire system within the United States to continue to grow and help talent grow. And this is part of that. And she said, after the Olympics, I'm going to do this. And here you go. She has done it. She called up the players she had to call up who went to the Olympics per the CBA. Every other slot has been given to a player that hasn't gotten a look in a long time or simply has never gotten a look. I love that Ashley Sanchez is getting a look again because she has been fantastic in this season of the NWSL, and I think she really almost always is. Alyssa Thompson as well has been carrying Angel City. She got a look, and that's fantastic. And then 6 uncapped players. The one that stands out to me is none other than Gotham FC's own Yasmin Ryan. Yasmin Ryan has been basically the glue of Gotham FC last year and this year, and is such an underrated player, and I'm so happy that she's getting this look. I can't wait to see her get her first cap. It's so exciting. I asked Emma Hayes about Yasmin Ryan on that press conference, and she said that Yasmin is now at a point in her career where she feels like this is a good next step for her. She's at that point where now that next challenge, it's not going to be too much for her to face. She's ready for it. And now Emma Hayes is ready to give her that opportunity to step into it. And that was a really common theme. Emma Hayes seems to be being very careful with players and their development and when they're called into camp. So I'm really excited for this. I'm excited to see a lot of young players. I don't know if they're going to get the playing time. I don't know if Emma Hayes is going to just call them in and let them train in the environment, but not really get a ton of minutes on the field, or if it's going to be the opposite, if they're going to see a lot of minutes. So I'm excited to see what happens. All right, let's move it on to the Lionesses. Allie, are there any big inclusions or exclusions that you want to call out?
So I think the one that everybody's talking about is the fact that Kiara Keating missed out on a spot in the goalkeeping because they've only taken 3. Anna Morehouse is back in after a brilliant season with Orlando. Keating, however, it's possibly because she's had a lack of game time at Man City. She's only played in 1 Champions League game. Also, as we mentioned, there's been some legal issues. We won't go too much into that, but it's possible that Sarina doesn't want those highlighted during the international break and is giving Keating the time to deal with those before she gets a call up. Sarina did say in her press conference that the door is not closed on Keating. She's just couldn't ignore Morehouse based on the form that she's been in the NWSL, which I think makes a lot of sense when you've got a player that's played pretty much every game for a team versus a player that's played 1. It makes a lot of sense. Huge for Jessica Naz and Aggie Beaver-Jones, both earning their first full call-ups. They had been on reserve lists. I think for me the biggest omission has got to be the fact that Nikita Paris hasn't had a call-up, because Nikita, again, from her time at Man United to her time with Brighton, has been the most in-form player up front. She did say that she wants to make it as hard as possible for Sarina to pick players, which I think is fantastic. I think it does give Sarina a headache because, like I said, she is one of the most informed players at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see in the next international break whether or not she's managed to cement her place in there. And the other one is that Lauren James has now dropped out due to a calf injury and is staying with Chelsea to focus on the recovery of that.
All right, and finally, let's talk about the games. The U.S. take on Iceland twice and then Argentina. They've got 3 games in this international window. They'll play Iceland Thursday and Sunday, and then Argentina for one final time next Wednesday.
And the Lionesses will take on the old enemy Germany on Friday the 25th of October, and then they will take on South Africa on Tuesday the 29th.
And other games other than US and England, Spain plays Canada on Friday and then Italy on Tuesday. Canada is just playing 1 game in this international break, so that Spain game will be Canada's only game. And a reminder that Bev Priestman's suspension is for 1 year, so we will see acting head coach Andy Spence on the sideline for Canada.
Yep, and then also Germany will take on Australia. That will be a massive clash for those 2 teams. And then finally, it is a South America derby with Brazil taking on Colombia twice. That is going to be a cracking game, both sides to watch.
All right, we're excited for these, and we will see you next Wednesday as always. And a reminder to head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/TheWoso Show for extra bonus content. That's it for us this week. I've been Sarah.
And I've been Allie.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.